go ahead and get welfare, you poor thing." After those words, the two of them left the house. I felt all the strength leave my body and slumped down on the spot. I couldn't help but remember what Greg had said earlier. "While you are indeed independent, I've always felt like my pride as a man has been hurt. From now on, I will build a family with my sister-in-law, no, with Brandy. So, please, let's get a divorce." I became indifferent to everything and signed the divorce papers to indicate my intention to divorce. Sometime later, I decided to demand property division from them. And we had a meeting with a lawyer present. Brazenly, an unrelated sister demanded a share of the assets. However, the lawyer burst into laughter and said, "Aren't you the one on welfare?" What? Caught off guard by the sudden turn of events, my sister made a baffled face and let out a ridiculous scream. Immediately after, seeing the documents the lawyer had placed on the table, my sister turned pale. "My name is Aaron Anderson. My husband, Greg, and I have been married for 18 years. And I am 45 years old, while Greg is 3 years younger at 42. We have one daughter between us, Jenny, who is currently 17 years old and in her second year of high school. She is facing an important period with her exams coming up next year. Greg and I met through work. I was working at a real estate company, and Greg was employed at a related company. We hit it off over something trivial and frequently went out in our private lives. Greg is very sensitive and often struggles to make decisions decisively. At the time, I found his indecisiveness endearing and was drawn to him. I wanted to take care of Greg and did so purely because I have a much younger brother. Initially, I saw Greg as a brother and took care of him. But gradually, I was attracted to his more masculine sides. After a serious relationship, we got married. Greg, who was usually indecisive, took the initiative to confess and propose. In situations where decisions had to be made, he did so properly. That gap made me feel that I could marry him and be okay. We had Jenny without experiencing any serious arguments or crises of divorce. I thought that once Jenny became an adult, we would start our second life as a couple. "Hey, Aaron. Can I stay here for a bit?" That was until my sister Brandy showed up unannounced with a large suitcase. Besides my brother, I have another sibling, which is the sister standing before me. We get along well with my brother due to the age difference. However, my sister, who is close in age to me, and I have always had a poor relationship. I was always smaller and ended up wearing my sister's hand-me-downs. When our parents felt sorry and bought me a new toy.
Aww.
Lucky. Give me one too. Saying that, my sister snatched the new doll I had received and replaced it with her old, worn-out doll. Her tyranny didn't stop there. Taking things was still on the cuter side. When I entered elementary school, she took all my friends. And when I got my first boyfriend in high school, she seduced him away. I hated her so much that I went to a different university to avoid her. But she still interfered with my life, ruining what should have been a fun college life. I still dislike my sister to this day. If possible, I don't want anything to do with her. So, I studied hard, obtained my real estate license, moved to New York, and lived a life without seeing my sister. For our wedding, Greg and I decided to have a photo wedding just for the two of us. Knowing my sister's personality, my parents kept my marriage a secret. Despite my hopes, my sister found out about my presence here. I was looking forward to having some time for myself and my husband once Jenny went to college. Wow, Aaron, you live in a pretty nice house for yourself. Is it a single-family home? Did you buy it? Oh, there's a room available here. I'll be using this one, thanks. I was snapped back to reality by my sister's shrill voice. Hey, this is really inconvenient. You can't just show up and expect to stay. My husband and daughter live here too, you know. My sister ignored my words and started looking around the house. Today was a holiday, but Jenny was out attending classes. And Greg had left early in the morning for work. Could you please leave before the two of them come back? I pleaded with her repeatedly, but my sister wouldn't listen. And finally, in the evening, both of them came home. Who might this be? To Greg, who looked puzzled, my sister greeted him with a charm that belied her 46 years. Nice to meet you. I'm Aaron's sister, Brandy. When did you two get married? I had no idea, no greetings or anything. I was visiting our parents' house and found your photo wedding pictures in Mom's room by chance. It's so cold of you, keeping it from your own sister. Greg knew I had a sister. So, he looked slightly troubled, probably thinking she was exactly as I had described. But I didn't miss it. Greg, slightly smitten by my beautiful sister, and Jenny, returning home to a confused scene. It must have been surprising for them. Suddenly, an aunt they had never met before had invaded our home. However, my sister pushed forward with the idea of moving in. Actually, I got fired, and it's been tough managing rent and living expenses. So I was wondering if I could stay here for a bit. Well, if it's just for a little while, I guess it's okay. What? Now is not the... Jenny has her exams next year, a critical time. I tried to say that, but the two of them didn't listen to me and got carried away. Actually, Erin told me about her sister. That's okay. Erin probably avoided talking about me. So you went along with it, right? Sorry about my sister. This marked the beginning of a tumultuous daily life. My sister demanded money without doing any chores and even started taking cash from my wallet. This all happened within just 1 week of her moving in. I had repeatedly warned her about this behavior, but she didn't listen. Hey, if you need money, at least tell me what you're buying or why you need it. Don't just take it from my wallet without asking. What? Why do I need to report to you what I'm buying? Because it's my money. If she was fired, I wished she would job hunt and leave our house quickly. However, it didn't seem like she was looking for a job, and recently, Greg and Brandy's schedules have been suspiciously overlapping. Greg claimed he was working overtime, but his salary never reflected any overtime pay. I confronted him about it. Your salary doesn't include overtime, does it? If you can't ask for overtime pay, should I ask on your behalf? What? Are you doubting me? I'm properly paid for my overtime. Separate from my salary, so there's no issue. Greg, usually mild-mannered, raised his voice for the first time. This was shocking enough for me, as Greg wasn't someone who resorted to emotional arguments or sudden outbursts. From this point, I started to feel a crisis looming over our current lifestyle. My sister continued to laze around the house, costing more money than even Jenny consumed, leaving me with nothing but sighs. I discussed this matter with our parents. They apologized for their lack of oversight, which led to my sister finding out about my marriage and our home. But the fault wasn't with my parents. Despite the distance from my dear parents, I lived quietly with my husband and daughter. Yet my sister became obsessed enough to track down our home. She must have been preparing to find out where we lived the moment she discovered the photo wedding pictures Greg and I took. I'm sure she's thinking of taking my things and making me miserable again. I've even begun to doubt whether her claim of being fired is true. Perhaps she quit her job on purpose to freeload at our place and ruin my life. This began to seem like a possibility. If that's the case, I need to kick my sister out of the house as soon as possible. Hey, you said you got fired, but if you were enrolled in employment insurance, wouldn't you be eligible for unemployment benefits? I've always been working part-time, so I wasn't enrolled in anything like that. That's why I'm in trouble. I could have gone back to our parents' house. But I can't just make our elderly parents take care of me, right? So, as the independent sister, you should take responsibility. That's common sense. I was speechless at her nonsensical statement. After dropping out of college, Brandy had always worked part-time and never as a full-time employee. Learning this fact later made me realize why her job hunting wasn't going well. Then, 3 months after Brandy began freeloading, I caught Greg and her in an affair. I had been suspicious, but to actually see them cheating. A meeting was cancelled, and while killing time in a cafe, I saw Greg and Brandy walking together, hand in hand, chatting happily. It's inconceivable for a brother-in-law and sister-in-law to hold hands like that. At that moment, I was certain they were having an affair. After a while, when I had made up my mind, I confronted them at home. So, the overtime was a lie, huh? And you, pretending to job hunt while actually hanging out with Greg. The worst. Even at this age, you can't be satisfied without taking something from me, can you? That's why I kept my marriage a secret from you. I exploded with emotion, and they casually admitted to the affair. Then began to say even more infuriating things. If I had known such a beautiful woman was your sister, I wouldn't have avoided her just because you told me to. Aaron, you're indeed independent, but I've always felt my pride as a man was being hurt. From now on, I want to build a family with my sister-in-law, no, with Brandy. So, let's get a divorce. He then pushed a divorce paper towards me, already filled out in Greg's section. Fine, there's no way we can rebuild this. Brandy, Greg, from now on, I won't be responsible for your financial support, so just know that. Brandy then laughed out loud and said, "Go ahead and get welfare, you poor thing." What? As I wondered what she meant, Greg, half smiling, added something even more appalling. "Oh, that's right. Since custody usually favors the mother, it's better for our daughter to be with you, Aaron. Do whatever you want from now on." With those words, they left the house. A few minutes later, Jenny came home and was puzzled by the quietness of the house. I honestly told her that we were getting a divorce. Initially shocked, Jenny seemed somewhat relieved as she accepted the situation. After a while, the divorce was finalized. I decided to discuss compensation with them in the presence of a lawyer I hired. Shamelessly, Brandy demanded a division of assets. However, the lawyer burst into laughter and said, "Aren't you the one who should be on welfare?" What? Caught off guard by the sudden turn of events, Brandy made a baffled face and let out a ridiculous scream. Immediately after, seeing the documents the lawyer placed on the table, Brandy turned pale. This couple doesn't have the kind of money that can be divided. Brandy looked shocked as she glanced back and forth between Greg and me. Of course, Greg was also surprised to hear that we hardly had any assets. Anticipating this, I had taken certain actions immediately after witnessing Greg and Brandy's affair. Therefore, the only cash between us was a mere $12,000. For a couple celebrating their 18th wedding anniversary, it's a hard-to-believe amount. Hey, what's going on? You had a lot of savings, didn't you? Greg, completely bewildered, asked this in a panic. Seeing him like that, I felt a surge of anger. You really have no interest in Jenny, do you? We talked about this. I said I've been saving up for her education, but now, I'm thinking of transferring it to Jenny's account. You told me to do as I wish. So, I transferred almost all of my savings to Jenny's account for her education. You should know this better than anyone. Jenny is managing her own money, and even after paying gift tax, it's no longer considered our savings. As I said this with a composed face, Greg's complexion turned visibly worse as he remembered the conversation. Then, what's the breakdown of the $12,000? About 80% of it is probably Greg's secret savings. Saying this, Greg looked at me as if wondering how I knew about it. You knew about it and transferred your savings to Jenny. Anticipating the division of property? You agreed to it. Remember, you even signed the consent form. At this, Greg became furious. I thought it was strange. Why would you ask for my consent just for that? Greg said this while frantically scratching his head, clearly regretting his actions. But it was too late to take back his signature. The lawyer confirmed that since Greg had agreed to the gift to Jenny, it was no longer considered marital savings. I didn't want to give such money to these two. That's why I thought of making a living gift. Hearing this, Brandy was dumbfounded but somehow managed to say to Greg, Hey, you said we had plenty of savings. Weren't we supposed to live a luxurious life together? Dividing $12,000 won't amount to much. Why didn't you realize Aaron's intentions sooner? Brandy reproached Greg, her face turning pale, but Greg avoided her gaze and kept silent. Greg had been earning little and had a considerable amount of student loans. So he hardly contributed to the living expenses after our marriage. However, this was agreed upon. When Greg mentioned it was difficult for him to contribute to living expenses, I said, All right, I'll manage all the living expenses. So, could you focus on saving money for our old age as much as possible? Thus, I had been covering all living expenses for over a decade. Greg thought he had been able to save at least $1,000 or more. But when it was revealed, it was less than $10,000. I had thought saving would be easy since he didn't have to pay living expenses. But Greg had been secretly squandering money. I felt betrayed when I accidentally saw his bank book left on the desk and learned of the savings amount. However, now that we're divorced, such matters no longer concern me. Brandy, finally grasping the severity of the situation, trembled slightly, trying hard to think of what to do next, but apparently came up with nothing. Knowing that the cash available for division was only $12,000 and seeing Brandy's confusion, I decided to reveal another truth. I looked towards Greg and said, I was debating whether to say this, but Greg, aren't you planning to quit your job? At that moment, our eyes met squarely. Greg, visibly shaken, glanced left and right before exclaiming, How do you know I'm planning to quit my job? I only talked about it with the boss. I thought so after seeing the payroll slip. My observation was based on the fact that no overtime pay was being paid, but actually, I found it strange looking at a certain section. This is about the use of paid leave. Greg, who used to work for a real estate company and now works for a construction company, has never taken more than the minimum required 5 days of paid leave. However, recent pay slips revealed that Greg had taken a bunch of paid leave all at once, which usually suggests resignation. At this time, I was already suspecting their affair, wondering if Greg decided to quit his job, thinking he would get a large sum of money after divorcing me. To my surprise, this guess was right on the mark. I couldn't help but sigh at Greg's overly optimistic thinking. Well, you were my husband, so you should at least know what job I do and how much wealth I've accumulated. To think you relied on that, cheated, and even chose to resign. You really haven't thought this through. As I said this, Greg's face turned red. The lawyer's remark to Brandy, asking if she was the one on welfare, meant that if the two unemployed individuals came together, they would end up on welfare unless they worked. Brandy, flustered by this realization, suddenly shouted, Wait a minute. If you can prepare for Jenny's college expenses and cover living costs all by yourself, there must be something fishy. I get it, you're hiding assets, right? That's the only explanation. Come on, confess now. Hearing her words, Greg seemed to have an epiphany. That's right. Brandy, actually, Aaron owns a lot of real estate. So we have to divide those assets too. Close call, I almost got tricked. Real estate is a significant asset, and we need to split it fairly between us. You've been acting all high and mighty, but you're also using sneaky tactics. Watching the two of them laughing about this, I was just dumbfounded. The lawyer couldn't help but chuckle at their ignorance. The tension in the room heightened. The lawyer cleared his throat and began to speak plainly. If we're going to talk about the division of property, you should study up a bit more. Greg, as the ex-husband, you should know that Erin owns real estate through her company, generating profit. A corporation and an individual are separate entities. Erin's company is her separate property, and it cannot be divided as marital property. The professionals have spoken, and there's no mistake. Realizing this, the two of them turned red and were speechless. The lawyer continued. What can be considered for division are things like cars, houses, and cash savings. Moreover, Greg and Brandy have virtually admitted to their affair, allowing Erin to demand compensation from you two. Let's say $10,000 from Greg and $3,000 from Brandy. As soon as they heard this, their faces contorted. Isn't that too high? It was just a few months' affair.
Yeah.
Isn't this normally not as much as $10,000? They seemed not to have expected such a turn of events and began making excuses. However, I immediately countered. Who decided that? The market is just a reference. Greg, you took leave to secretly date my sister, and she didn't even bother to properly job hunt, instead choosing to live off my money. The lawyer objectively assessed the situation and decided on this amount. What? Would you have preferred a higher amount? At that, they hastily shook their heads no. The discussion couldn't be concluded in just one day and was adjourned. But I felt a firm response. 2 weeks later, we convened again for discussions. Brandy, with a defiant attitude, said, "Give me the house and the regular car. Is that what you call compensatory property division? Then, give Greg's $12,000 to him, and I'll pay the remaining $1,000, okay?" Hearing such nonsensical demands, I was about to yell in anger but managed to control myself with reason, and slowly sorted out the situation. The house still had a mortgage and required maintenance regularly, so it would have some value if sold. The car was also relatively new, purchased just 5 years ago. Accepting my sister's proposal would mean a loss for me, which I absolutely did not want. Sister, did you even do the math? If you consider selling the house and car, you wouldn't say such things. Usually, it's not the cheating party, you guys, who should be making these demands, it's me. As I pondered how brazen they could be, Greg, sitting next to my sister, overlapped my words with his own, beginning to say something else. You own assets worth $170 million in the company, right? I don't care if you're some real estate mogul or whatever. But being so stingy with all that wealth is just insane. Caught off guard for a moment, I ended up laughing at their absurdity given the situation. Seeing me suddenly burst into laughter made the two of them freeze. After a good laugh, I returned to a serious expression. So, is that all you wanted to say? And why are you acting like you're the victims here? Stingy? I'd rather be stingy than give any money to a man who abandons his daughter for an affair. Or to the worst kind of sister who steals her sibling's husband. I'd rather secure as much as possible for Jenny. They flinched at my words. I wanted to tell them to study more about legal terms if they wanted to use them. What were they even thinking, saying such things? I planned to dismantle their delusions bit by bit. Greg, This house is under my name, right? I know that, but we've lived together here so. So what? It's my separate property since I bought it with a mortgage before we got married. No matter how you twist it, it remains mine. The car, bought new, is accident-free and of a model that sells well. If you want it, you'll have to pay me half its appraised value. That's how property division works. We own 2 cars. One is the new car currently being discussed. The other, a used compact car, probably wouldn't fetch much. But, the lawyer said, houses and cars are subject to property division. She said this without thinking it through. But that's not what it meant. Look, the lawyer was just mentioning the main things subject to property division. Not that they'd necessarily be divided in our case. All we have to divide between us is the $12,000 from Greg's secret savings and my savings. Plus the 2 cars. That's it. Naturally, Brandy was clueless, and Greg hadn't thought it through, landing them in trouble again. Greg pleaded with me after showing some semblance of thought. Can you just give us enough money to start our new life well, please? His apology seemed superficial. He just wanted to solve the immediate problem. I don't need such a shallow apology. I steeled my heart and responded. Given your attitude, it seems like you wouldn't want to pay for Jenny's child support either. There's not a single thing I'm willing to compromise on. Why should I have to worry about your living expenses? I firmly stated my position, and realizing they couldn't persuade me further, they reluctantly signed the necessary documents. Sometime after the divorce and property division were settled, Brandy called me repeatedly, complaining. Why did Greg have so much debt? You were paying the living expenses, right? Then, why would he need to borrow money? What's going on? She was HYSD gentle over the phone. I patiently explained the reality to her. That should have been obvious when it came out that he only had less than $10,000 saved despite having years to save. Maybe he made some big purchases on credit or something like that? As I asked this, Brandy eagerly shared her situation. Yes. He took loans of several thousands to buy nonsensical brand items. And it turns out his credit card was set to revolving payments without him knowing, making a huge mess. So, this guy is just a debt disaster. How could you push such a person onto me? Push onto you? You're the one who stole him, remember? I couldn't help but retort with a half laugh, and Brandy fell silent. It seems Greg had been accumulating debts I wasn't even aware of. Now, demand letters are arriving in droves. He must have been careless with his address change. Or perhaps, in the chaos of starting a new life, he forgot to hide them. Oh, and there's one more thing I haven't told you, Brandy. What now? Brandy was utterly terrified, but hearing about the debt made me recall something. Greg had mentioned he was working in construction now, as a sole proprietor. While this meant his income and residence taxes were deducted, he was responsible for managing other necessary payments himself. Being self-employed, I handle my national pension and health insurance. And when Greg left his job in real estate, I made arrangements for Jenny to be covered by the national health insurance as well. I took care of my taxes and such. But it turned out Greg hadn't paid his national pension for a year since he switched jobs. I was covering the health insurance, so there was no issue there. Due to some mistake, a national pension demand notice was sent to our house. I contacted Greg and got his permission to open it, and it was indeed a demand notice. He had been hiding it all along, and I hadn't noticed. I pay my own national pension and assumed Greg was paying his. When I called Greg about opening the demand notice, he almost cried and begged for help. National pension costs that much? You're kidding, right? I can't pay this. We were a family, weren't we? Can't you do something, please? What? You have the nerve to say that? The very person who abandoned his wife and child is asking for help? My logic left Greg speechless again. Realizing there was no way out, Brandy seemed to lose all hope over the phone as well. So, you'll have to figure it out yourselves. I ended the call. Eventually, Greg called, complaining about the high taxes on the car I had taken and how expensive the vehicle inspection was. Maintaining a car costs this much? I thought taxes were just a few $10, but they're in the hundreds. And the vehicle inspection costs so much. It's tough, isn't it? Can't you take it back? No. After I curtly refused, Greg hung up, deflated. He kept sending emails asking for help. But when I warned him that any more harassment would lead me to report him for stalking, he stopped. Brandy and Greg were in for a hell worse than hell itself. They ended up divorcing after only 3 months of marriage, immediately following our divorce. Their plan had been doomed from the start when they realized the house under my name wasn't part of the assets to be divided. Their marriage was never going to work with tens of thousands in debt and compensation to pay. Their divorce was more tumultuous than my own with Greg. Brandy was always fixated on money. Sell the new car. It's a waste to keep something like that. Might as well cash it in, right? What? I don't care about that petty cash. Besides, I paid your compensation in full. So if we're splitting, you owe me that money. They couldn't finalize their divorce because of such petty arguments. Eventually, Greg chose to declare bankruptcy. Unaffectedly by me since I had already collected the lump sum compensation. Greg ended up jobless and penniless, leading him to homelessness. He couldn't retract his statement about quitting his job and left the company. Pride prevented him from applying for welfare. Now, he's likely living a miserable life, begging on the streets. Brandy faced divine retribution. After stealing her sister's husband and divorcing in just 3 months, her social relationships crumbled. Disowned by family and relatives, she struggled with job hunting due to her attitude. Even when she managed to get part-time jobs, her domineering nature and refusal to accept fault led to immediate dismissals. The lawyer's warning about welfare became reality. Brandy, clinging to her possessions, was ineligible for welfare, evicted from her apartment, and became homeless like Greg. They trampled on the feelings of both me and Jenny with their selfish actions. So this punishment was only natural. Now, it's just the two of us living together, but our days haven't changed much. Jenny said she felt relieved after Greg, who never did anything for her yet always complained about studying and going to a good university, was gone. And then, she splendidly passed the entrance exam to an Ivy League university. Seeing my daughter about to start her college life this fall fills me with renewed emotion. As I near 46, busy in a good way with work and still healthy, I'm motivated to keep pushing forward. You're just an old maid who can't even have kids. We don't need a useless older sister anymore. After losing our mother early on, I've acted as a mother figure to my sister, who is 8 years younger than me. My younger sister is often nagged by me about many things because of her uninhibited nature. Because of this, I could sense from her attitude that she felt estranged from me. Even our father tried to admonish her behavior, but it never had any effect. Still, I did my best to take care of her, trying to keep a promise I made to our mother. When my sister became an adult, I finally started to have some time for myself and even got married. I thought I was finally going to experience the happiness most people do. But my sister was the one who ruined it. It turned out she was having an affair with my husband. I've always hated how you acted like you were my mom. Your pretense of being such a good person disgusts me." She glared at me, openly showing her disgust, without a hint of remorse. Moreover, she has my husband's baby in her belly. Faced with their unbelievable actions, I was overwhelmed by anger and sadness. But I knew that happiness would never come to the two of them. They would realize this in time, so I walked away. My name is Ruby. I'm 35 years old, born as the elder sister in a family of 2 girls. I'm not flashy and dislike standing out. Due to my nature as the eldest child, I find it difficult to rely on others and rarely show my weaknesses. I can't ignore someone in trouble around me. Contrastingly, my sister Daisy, who is 7 years younger, has a charming personality and is good at making others dote on her. She's self-centered and a bit spoiled. Our father is somewhat quiet but also has a kind heart, perhaps more similar to me. My mother married my father, who was a childhood friend, and even though they were poor, she was always smiling and good-natured. When I was just 10, she left us, asking me to take care of your father and Daisy from her deathbed. She died of pancreatic cancer, which was too advanced when discovered. Losing our mother suddenly, my father and I were devastated to the point of being unable to eat. Daisy was too young to fully understand our mother's death and seemed dazed. However, we couldn't let ourselves be consumed by sorrow forever. From now on, we'll do our best, the 3 of us, we decided, looking forward. Mom, please watch over us from heaven. I spoke to my mother's photo on the altar, engraving her last wish in my heart. At that time, my father was a long-haul truck driver. He would wake up at 2 a.m. for work and not return home until 10 p.m. Our nearby grandmother would occasionally check on us. But since she had her own health issues, we couldn't rely on her much. Fortunately, I was in elementary school and was already capable of handling cooking, laundry, and cleaning, having started to help with household chores in place of my frail mother from an early age. Thus, I took care of Daisy, hoping to lessen our father's burden. Big sis, she would say, following me around adorably. While other kids were busy playing after school, I was doing household chores with Daisy, making us stand out as different. Our father often apologized for the inconvenience and would take us to the sea or mountains on his days off with packed lunches. We couldn't afford amusement parks or vacations, but I loved those family picnics. Time passed, and I became a high school student. Without joining any clubs, I spent my after-school hours working part-time at a supermarket to help with the household finances. A college student working there would tease me, saying, "Ruby, you're so young yet carry yourself like a veteran housewife." This college student had a way of joking around and talking to me about something. But it was not unpleasant, and he had a kind side to him, sometimes giving me delicious snacks and drinks. One break time. "Here's some coffee for you, working maiden." "Ruby, why do you work so much?" While handing me a can of coffee, he grinned in his usual manner. "If you're going to say that, it's a working girl, not maiden. Our family might be poor, but I want my sister to be able to pursue her dreams. And I want to ease the burden on our father. I like being someone's support." I got too carried away and answered too seriously. I glanced nervously to the side and was relieved to see him listening seriously. Unlike what I expected. "That's actually pretty cool. I respect that. Count me in as your supporter." Looking closely, the college student was tall, handsome, and had well-defined features. "Don't fall for me," he joked with a mischievous grin, making me chuckle too. There were also many part-timers working at this part-time job, who were about the same age as my parents. They taught me various useful life tips and expanded my cooking repertoire, all being incredibly kind and memorable. During this time, my father switched from being a truck driver to a logistics warehouse manager. His new job had regular hours from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., which relieved me considering his health. However, the economic downturn affected his salary with fluctuations. Consequently, our family's finances were in dire straits. I decided to work at a food processing company. After graduating high school instead of going to college, my teacher said, "With your grades, you could get into the university of your choice. There are scholarships available too." But coming from a not-so-wealthy family, I didn't want to burden my father with more financial stress. And I didn't want Daisy to go through the same hardships. I wanted her to graduate from university. With that determination, I worked hard from the start of my career in April. The company I joined was a large organization with branches nationwide, employing a diverse workforce, including high school graduates, college graduates, and those from other professions. Among my colleagues was the same college student from the supermarket. "Hey. Good to be working with you again." He greeted me with a bright smile and a wave. "Since we're colleagues now, and I'm older, feel free to call me casually," he said. His name was Lucas. Knowing someone at my first job made me feel less anxious and more encouraged. At the factory where I was assigned after that, I had to stand all day, which was hard until my body got used to it. But the camaraderie among workers and adequate breaks made it bearable. Earning a steady salary made our lives much more manageable than before. Meanwhile, Daisy, now in middle school, became increasingly rebellious, unaware or indifferent to my sacrifices. "I can't eat your lame lunch in public. It's embarrassing. Just give me money," she demanded rudely, throwing her lunchbox at me, and at times, "You look so worn out and old. I never want to end up like you," she said, looking down on me. Her disdain was palpable through her behavior, avoiding talking to me whenever possible. Our father tried to intervene, but his words fell on deaf ears. As if a poor man has the right to lecture. Being born into such a low-class family is the worst. Unable to tolerate her disrespect any longer. "Daisy. There's a right and a wrong way to speak. Apologize to Dad," she responded with a dismissive, "Annoying. It's just the truth." I totally lost the family lottery. Anne rolled her eyes, showing no signs of remorse. Dad and I could only hope her rebellious phase would pass, observing her behavior silently. Despite her attitude at home, Daisy's natural charm made her popular outside, often receiving compliments on how well-raised she was. As she grew up, Daisy became the opposite of my plain self, indulging in flashy clothes, makeup, and changing boyfriends frequently, enjoying her youth and university life. There were times when I suffered because I could not convey my feelings to her. But I did my best with that one thought in mind. I had promised my mother that I would raise Daisy well because Mom had asked me to do so. Finally, when Daisy graduated and started working, I began to have some time for myself. Yet, with no particular hobbies or desires, my life remained a cycle between home and work. One day, my father suddenly asked, "Don't you have a boyfriend, Ruby? It's about time you met someone nice and settled down." It seemed my father was worried about me, as I had never brought home a boyfriend, let alone entertained the idea of marriage. Therefore, I decided to register with a marriage consultation service due to the lack of romantic encounters in my life. The matchmaker introduced me to a man 3 years older than me, a civil servant working for the city hall. He was of average build and height with a calm and gentle demeanor. This man would later become my husband, Tom. He was an anime freak who spent a lot of money and time on his hobby and admitted to having little experience with women. Tom's conversations always revolved around his hobbies, passionately explaining the lengths he went to acquire rare figurines. He never complained about work or spoke ill of others, which I found appealing. After several meetings, while there were no heart-racing moments, I felt that I could build a stable family life with him. We shared similar values, which led us to marriage. We didn't have a wedding ceremony but opted for a photo wedding instead. Tom, coming from a single-parent family, arranged a small meal with our families to celebrate. But Daisy was the only one who refused to attend, claiming she had no interest. Looking at our wedding photo at home, Daisy laughed rudely, commenting, "My sister's husband is ugly. Seems like he doesn't have much experience with women and looks easy to manipulate. The only good thing about him might be his money." After graduating from university, Daisy worked as a beauty product salesperson but quit saying she was bored. Since then, she has been drifting from one part-time job to another. It seemed she had someone, whether a boyfriend or a male friend, who showered her with expensive gifts. Even as adults, the strained relationship between Daisy and me remained unrepaired, causing my heart to ache. Will there ever be a day when we can laugh and hold hands as sisters? Yet, I believed that someday she would understand. Holding on to this belief, I occasionally sent Daisy letters and gifts, updating her about my life. Continuing to work after getting married, I led a fulfilling life, juggling work and household duties. As we were both of a certain age, we agreed that we wanted children soon and started visiting a clinic for infertility treatments. Despite trying timing methods and undergoing tests, years passed without success. Nonetheless, my relationship with Tom remained peaceful without any arguments. Tom was happiest when watching anime or engaging in his fan activities, while I looked forward to making elaborate meals during my days off. However, recently, Tom's return home became late. His sudden business trips that required overnight stays increased. I tried to dismiss my suspicions, reminding myself not to doubt him. But the thought of another woman lingered. A faint smell of sweet perfume on Tom's shirt, a long strand of hair on his suit shoulder, and a single earring found in his bag seemed intentionally left to hint at his infidelity. Whenever I asked, "Who were you drinking with?" his answers were vague, leaving me filled with growing unease. Tom's behavior became increasingly suspicious, leading me to suspect an affair. Then, one day, I went out for drinks with my colleagues, so I decided to head home early. As I walked through the bustling dining district, slightly tipsy, I thought about humming a tune, feeling lighthearted. Suddenly, a familiar figure caught my eye. My heart tightened as I saw Tom walking arm in arm with a woman. That woman was, unbelievably, Daisy. They flirted and gazed into each other's eyes before disappearing into a hotel district. Why? My mind was in turmoil as tears streamed down my face, unable to confront the two about their betrayal. When Tom returned home later, pretending nothing was amiss, I confronted him. "You were in the hotel district today, weren't you?" "Eh?" "But I was at work." At first, Tom blurts it out. "I saw you walking with another woman. I also asked your coworkers, and they said you took a half-day off this afternoon." Realizing he couldn't hide it any longer after seeing my serious demeanor, Tom resignedly admitted, "Oh, you knew that." He then revealed that he had been having an affair with Daisy for a year. Daisy had approached him, and it was only after they got involved that he was told she was my sister. I happened to run into Daisy at a bar one night, and we hit it off. It just happened. At first, I thought it would just be a one-night mistake. But then we kept running into each other by chance. We were drawn to each other without knowing we were relatives. In a panic, Tom tried to excuse his actions. Daisy didn't know anything at first. She saw a photo on my phone and realized who I was. We were both shocked. It was clear Daisy knew who Tom was all along. She had seen our wedding photo. It was intentional. She knew from the beginning and approached my husband. To think that my sister would seduce my husband? I was furious and nauseated by Daisy's inconceivable actions. When I confronted Daisy, she spat out with disdain. "I've always hated how you acted like you were my mom. That goody two-shoes act of yours disgusts me." She showed no remorse. To make matters worse, Daisy was pregnant. With a triumphant look, she said, "We don't need a useless older sister anymore." Tom didn't try to stop Daisy's harsh words. Instead, he turned to me and said, "That's why there's no reason for me to stay with you. Let's get divorced. Daisy, thank you for making me a father. I'll protect you from now on." Tom's smug expression was infuriating. "Ruby, you've been horrible to your cute little sister, haven't you? I've heard all about it from Daisy." With a sigh, as if to say being disliked by me was to be expected, he continued, "You look so innocent, but you're actually wicked. Guys don't like that. Maybe that's why you've been punished with infertility?" Tom scolded me harshly, and then, as a final blow, he said, "I prefer younger women, anyway. I can forgive anything." This was the true nature of my husband. Daisy smirked, pleased with herself. As I watched the two of them being affectionate. Overwhelmed by anger and sadness at their unbelievable actions, I managed to say, "I will have nothing to do with you two ever again. I just wanted to leave as quickly as possible and return to my father's house." Upon hearing the story, my father trembled with rage, declaring, "Unforgivable. Daisy is no longer my daughter." We decided to cut ties with both Tom and Daisy and proceeded with the divorce. 3 years later, I unexpectedly ran into Daisy and my ex-husband at the gynecologist's office. Daisy was there with her child, pregnant with her second. She had visibly gained weight, to the point where the midwife cautioned her about the risks of being overweight during pregnancy. If she hadn't been with my ex-husband, I might not have recognized her. Daisy and my ex-husband ridiculed me for still trying to conceive, assuming I was there for infertility treatment. However, I shared my current situation with them. I had since married a colleague who had been by my side for a long time. On my right ring finger, a Harry Winston wedding ring. I had married Lucas, that college student. As I struggled with my divorce, barely able to eat and sinking into depression, it was Lucas who uplifted me with his words. "Look at the meaning for a. It's about making people better, right? Let's go eat something delicious for a start." He took me to various places, treating me to a myriad of tasty dishes. Thanks to him, I was able to recover. Lucas, it turned out, was the son of the president of the food company where I worked. His father had insisted he start from the ground up to become a worthy individual without relying on his family's status. A fact unknown outside the company's upper echelon. Determined to succeed on his own merits rather than connections, Lucas worked diligently, eventually rising to the position of executive vice president. Well regarded by his colleagues and seen as the future president. Even my earnest work and character caught the president's attention, leading to his blessing and support for our marriage. Life with Lucas has been filled with laughter every day. He's like my personal comedian, always finding ways to entertain me. He understands my reluctance to rely on others and preemptively takes care of everything for me. Now, I'm expecting a child with my current husband next month. Upon sharing this news with my ex-husband and Daisy, I also asked them. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you, but your kids, are they really yours?" I calmly explained that the infertility issue was not with me but with my ex-husband, who has azoospermia, making natural conception impossible. This disclosure led to a tumultuous scene. It turned out Daisy had been involved with multiple men aside from my ex-husband, reflecting her inability to be satisfied with just one partner. My ex-husband, after learning the truth about the children's paternity and Daisy's infidelity, erupted in anger, ultimately leading to their divorce. After their messy separation, my father revealed a deep family secret. Daisy was not biologically related to us, but was taken in after being left behind by a colleague of my father who had to flee due to debts and embezzlement. Given this history, we've decided not to support Daisy any further, despite her continued struggles and refusal to reflect on her actions. Daisy remains in a cycle of dissatisfaction and poor choices, unable to maintain a stable lifestyle. Meanwhile, I've been blessed with a child and live in a spacious duplex built by my husband, with my father residing next door. My father is seeing a woman 4 years younger than him whom he met at a hiking club, bringing new joy into our lives. As we embrace these peaceful days, we cherish the happiness that has come late in life for my father, warmly supporting him in this new chapter of his story. Can't you do it properly for once? What was the point of getting married if it's going to be like this? You don't have to say it like that. I've reached my limit. Despite everything being fine until now, I can't help but wonder if this change is hiding something. Even before we got married, it was like this. Limit? Mom used to handle things much better. Why can't you do even this simple thing? Huh? Why don't you do it yourself? You can at least clean, right? In the first place, Before I could finish, my husband started speaking. You are my wife. You should be doing what you're supposed to. Mom never complained about this. I thought, how old are you really? Getting irritated by the constant mentions of mom. What makes me even more irritated is how childlike he becomes when talking about his mother. If he misses his mom that much, he might as well live with her. Yet, his tirades continued unchecked. Hey. How many times do I have to tell you? Are you messing with me with this kind of seasoning? Mom would have known my favorite flavors. I glared at my husband. What are you glaring at? This is your fault. Saying that, he flipped the plate in front of him. The table was a mess, as if he had flipped a low dining table over. I thought, how much do you really like her? Indeed, my mother-in-law was kind to everyone, and her support for my father-in-law was something I aspired to emulate. But she also had her strictness. That's why I couldn't imagine her spoiling my husband like this. I thought, I wonder if it's different when I'm not around. There are many questions, but right now, I need to address this situation. I can't eat this, I'm going to eat out. After saying just that, my husband left. Left behind, I cleaned up the mess on the table caused by my husband. Even then, he did nothing but act as if he was superior. If this continues, my mental health will deteriorate. I'm pregnant, and if this goes on, it will affect the baby too. I wanted to avoid that at all costs. And then, when I was about to give birth, I've found someone better than you, so let's get a divorce. I never thought my husband would say such a thing. However, it was nothing but convenient for me. I'll do as you say. You're surprisingly obedient, huh? Then sign this divorce paper quickly. At that time, I was not the least interested in the other party. The divorce was finalized, and I immediately contacted my father. 2 days after the divorce, my husband came to visit me. Yo. Long time no see. What are you doing here? You have no business with me anymore, right? I thought I'd introduce you out of the goodness of an ex-husband. Look. A cute wife, right? There's a world of difference between her and you, who was nothing but a windowside worker doing menial tasks. I recognized the face of his new wife.
Ah.
What? By the way, which company does she work as a receptionist at? Come to think of it, my father mentioned that a new receptionist joined recently. My husband was unaware. He didn't know that my father was an executive at his company, and that I had already made my moves. At this point, my husband seemed to realize something. Father? Your maiden name was, no, that can't be. I thought, he's not that stupid after all. After that, my husband began to panic and scream as if he had gone mad. He was on a straight path to hell. A deep hole from which he could never climb out. My revenge was just beginning. I am Hillary, working at a local company. Originally, I was at a company where my father was an executive. But I decided to change jobs because I wanted to touch design. I never knew you were interested in design. I really wanted to learn. Even though you introduced me to that job. No, it's fine. Doing what you want is best. Just don't do it half-heartedly. Yes. I thought I would be opposed at first, but that wasn't the case. There was another reason. I wanted to try living alone. That's why I chose a company a bit far from my parents' house. I thought, I guess I can't tell Dad this. After moving to a new town, I started exploring. I've always enjoyed visiting cafes. I thought, this place has a really nice atmosphere, just what I like. This is how I would meet George, who would later become my husband. I used to visit this cafe about 3 times a week. There, I encountered a certain scene. Is that? At that time, George was holding a brochure from the company I work for. What's up? Oh. Sorry for being sudden. That brochure is from our company, so I see. Actually, I was about to head there for a sales visit. After that, I guided George to our company. Thank you for today. And not at all. I just did what's natural. By the way, do you often go to that cafe? Yes. It's my favorite place. Is that so? Well, see you then. Yes. George left with a meaningful way of speaking. We would meet again 3 days later. Hello. Thanks for the other day. Hello. What brings you here today? I wanted to thank you for the other day. There's no need for thanks. I've come to like this cafe too. Let me treat you, since I'm here. Thus, we ended up chatting at the same table. George was cheerful, and talking to him felt comfortable. After that, even though we didn't specifically arrange to meet, we frequently saw each other. Whenever there was a bit of free time, I found myself heading to this place. This went on for about 2 months until George confessed to me, and I accepted. Looking forward to being with you. Me too. Our relationship began, and after a while, my sister Jessica came to visit. Sis, I'm here. You should at least contact me before coming. Come on. Your cute sister came to see you. So, how's life here? I'm enjoying it. Really? And, how about a boyfriend? A boyfriend, well. Then my sister started to smile mischievously. What? Looks like you've got a boyfriend. Huh? How can you tell? Because you've been all smiles since a while ago. What? Really? That reaction proves it.
Ah.
I never realized it showed on my face. I had never been told something like that before. Maybe I was really over the moon. Later, I married George when I was 27. And it was during the meeting of both families.
Ah.
Huh? What? Well, George's father. I thought I recognized him. Turns out he was one of my former subordinates. Really? Do they know that? Not sure. We didn't work together for long. But you remembered him well. Well, there were various things. At that time, I didn't understand why my father seemed a bit displeased. However, I would come to experience the reason for it myself later on. Can I ask you something? Sure. What is it? Do you know my father or something? Why do you think that? No, just felt a bit awkward, that's all. Maybe it's just your imagination? Is that so? I thought to myself how observant George really is. It seemed like my father-in-law was also aware of my father's existence. Thus, our married life began, but gradually George started showing his true colors. What's for dinner? Sorry, I got a bit late because of work. Not yet. George sighed heavily. I'm tired from work. I hope you can at least prepare the meals properly. I'll be more careful from now on. I really hope so. Please prepare it quickly. I'll prepare it right away. It wasn't just about meals, he started to comment on housework too. At first, I thought it was my fault and acted as George wanted. Although the complaints increased, he remained kind otherwise, so I wasn't too worried at that time. However, the situation worsened after George mentioned he was considering a job change. I'm thinking about changing jobs. What? A job change? Why? I'm a bit bored with my current job. Plus, the salary is higher at the new place, so it's a no-brainer to switch. That might be true, but anyway, I've already decided. About a month later, George successfully switched jobs. Although I hadn't heard the details, it seemed he was in the same sales role as before. And then, there was today, when I came home late from overtime work. I'm home. You're back. I'm starving. I'll prepare something right away. I cooked dinner and laid it out on the table. Sorry to keep you waiting. Oh. However, when George was about to take a bite, he froze, staring at the meal. What's wrong? It's just not what I was expecting. What do you mean? Never mind. I'm going to eat out tonight. Wait, just a minute. Just clean this up, will you? I didn't miss the mutter George let slip. Mom never did it like this. What did you just say? What do you mean? You just mentioned a mom, didn't you? I would never say something like that. Drop it. Saying that, George left. Considering his comment, I thought, could it be a mommy's boy? But it's the first time I've heard such a thing. Maybe I misunderstood. With these thoughts, I ate alone. Although there was a time I lived by myself, being alone suddenly felt incredibly lonely. Initially, I reluctantly went along with George's whims, but his selfishness escalated day by day. Where's my jacket? Huh? I haven't seen it. My jacket. Didn't I tell you to get it cleaned? You didn't mention it. What am I supposed to do now? I have an important deal today. I can't help it if you didn't tell me. I didn't think you could be this useless. You're not a child. Take care of it yourself. A wife is supposed to do these things normally. That's not normal at all. Our argument continued for a while. Why do we have to fight over such things from the morning? George then started raising his voice whenever things didn't go his way. It became more intense than ever before. I realized he never did any household chores or offered me any help. I thought, he used to be so kind before we got married. At home, he would just sit on the sofa and scroll through his smartphone. Only speaking to me when he needed something. Such behavior can hardly be called a marriage. Even I began to feel disgusted with this way of life. I thought, and we haven't even been married for a year. That's why I devised a plan. One night. If you make one more ridiculous comment, I'm leaving this house. Leaving? Yes. I've already decided. Do you think that's going to trouble me? George laughed at that moment, and I made up my mind. The next day was Saturday, and taking advantage of George being asleep, I left the house. Of course, I headed to my parents' house. Huh? Why are you here, sis? Well, it's a long story. A long story? I explained everything to my sister. What? Really? I wouldn't lie about this. But it's so unexpected. He didn't seem like that. People aren't always what they seem. Is that so? But he looked so handsome. Indeed, my sister had a point. But that's because she hadn't lived with him. For starters, marriage is tough. After that, I talked to my parents and decided to stay at my parents' house for a while. I never imagined George would be that kind of man. Looks can be deceiving, huh?
Yeah.
Sis said the same thing. Father, is that so? I was surprised by my father's relatively mild reaction. I thought he would be more outraged. Aren't you angry? Father. There's no need to get angry unnecessarily. Besides, you can't choose your family. What does that mean? You'll understand eventually. My father always keeps things brief. A week had passed since I started my stay at my parents' house. During that time, there was not a single attempt by George to contact me. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Hello? When I opened the door, George's mother was standing there. What brings you here? It's about George. Please, come in. I led George's mother to the living room. Then, she suddenly apologized. I really put you through a lot this time. I'm sorry. No, it's not your fault. But how did you find out? I came by to give you a souvenir from a trip I took. And you found out then? Yes, I noticed Hillary wasn't there as usual. Did George say anything? Yes. He seems to be reflecting on what happened. But he said it was hard to face you or something. I thought, no way, he's acting like a child over this? Does he always run to his mother like this? The previous mentions of a mom strongly suggest he might indeed be a mama's boy. And he seemed quite down. It's like he really can't do anything without you, Hillary. While we were talking, the doorbell rang. George was there. Won't you come back? It seems I can't do anything without you. It was exactly what his mother had just told me. Well, your mother is here, too. Oh? Right. He seemed visibly displeased, which I found unexpected. If he was really a mama's boy, wouldn't he be happy about this situation? I then led George to where his mother was. Why are you here? Well, it's just. You could have told me you were coming. I couldn't help it. I've been hesitating. Well, it's all right. Surely, you have more to say to Hillary, right? I know that. After taking a moment, George looked at me intently. What? I'm really sorry. I wasn't considering your feelings properly. George seemed unusually sincere. I couldn't see any deceit in his expression at that moment. If you're going that far, I understand. I'll come back. Really? His joy was obvious. Seeing this, his mother sighed. Honestly. So mercenary. Anyway, I need to talk to my parents, so I'll probably return tomorrow. Understood. I'll be waiting at home then. Then you should head back first. What? Okay. All right. With that, George reluctantly left. I wonder why he turned out this way. Could it be his father's influence? His father? Yes. When his father was about George's age. Right then, my parents, who had gone shopping, returned. What do we have here? I'm sorry for suddenly intruding. I'll be leaving soon. Since you're here, please stay a bit longer. In the presence of my parents, the mother-in-law explained again why she had come. So, you have decided to go back? Yes. I've decided to trust George again. After all, we are husband and wife. If that's what you've decided, then it's for the best.
Yeah.
Then, I'll be off. I've overstayed my welcome. Understood. Please come visit again. After the mother-in-law left, something she had started to say piqued my curiosity, prompting me to ask my father. There's something I want to ask. If I can answer it, I will. What kind of person is George's father? That's quite abrupt. No, we were talking about it just before you guys came back. Well, we were merely supervisor and subordinate, not close friends. But he was quite problematic. Problematic? How so? Well, between you and me. He had an affair with an employee while he was at our company. What? He said he left the company, but was that the reason? Yes. And that employee was quite troublesome. Father seemed exasperated. Maybe that's what the mother-in-law wanted to say earlier? It should have been dealt with internally, so she shouldn't know. But maybe she did notice. This raised a new question for me. If what the mother-in-law wanted to discuss was related to the father-in-law's affair. The stories didn't seem to match up. I thought, it's hard to believe he had an affair. Maybe I should ask the mother-in-law about it if I have a chance. Though left with lingering doubts, I decided to leave my parents' house the next day. You're leaving already? Well, George must be waiting. Indeed. Take care. It had been several weeks since I had returned home. I'm back. Entering the house, I was immediately surprised. From what the mother-in-law had said, I expected the house to be in complete disarray. Welcome back. I've been waiting.
Yeah.
Were you surprised that the house was cleaner than expected? I heard you couldn't do anything on your own. I couldn't impose any more burdens. I see. I felt a bit happier hearing George's words. From then on, George stopped constantly mentioning the mom, and I thought peaceful days were ahead. However, the situation drastically changed again when I became pregnant. About 6 months after we resumed our life together, my pregnancy was discovered. I thought this would bring even more happiness our way. As if to prove it, George started helping out without being asked. About 3 months after the pregnancy was discovered, one night changed everything. Is that true? That night, George received a call from his mother, looking somber. He handed me the phone. Yes, it was so sudden. A heart attack. And just when a grandchild was about to be born. I was at a loss for words at the sudden news. Where are you now? At the hospital. Understood. We'll be there as soon as we can. After hanging up, we hurried to leave the house. George sat on the sofa, slumped over. We're going to the hospital now, so get ready. Yes. Right. Supporting the unsteady George, we headed to the hospital. I hadn't been very close to my father-in-law, but the sadness was still there. Above all, he was George's father. Sorry for making you come. Thank you. No, you're the one who's going through a tough time, not us. It seemed the father-in-law had been suffering in silence, secretly visiting the hospital alone. But why? He was someone who hated relying on others. but dying like this solves nothing. The funeral for the father-in-law was a small affair with just close family. However, the mother-in-law visibly lost her spirits afterward. Concerned, I began visiting the mother-in-law regularly. You came today too. Thank you. I also brought your favorite sweets. I'm pleased. Seeing the mother-in-law's smile again brought me relief. Talking with her always seemed to have a calming effect on me. However, around the 6-month mark of my pregnancy, problems arose once more. George's outbursts began anew. What is this? What? What's wrong? This right here. George pointed at a pile of folded laundry. What about it? What's with this folding? Mom never folded like this. Do it over. Excuse me, what? That's when the nightmares of the past began to resurface. Realizing I couldn't go on like this, I decided to consult with the mother-in-law. Sorry for coming over so suddenly. Don't worry about it. Come in. Taking a sip of the coffee she offered. I tried to calm my nerves while figuring out how to explain my situation. But the mother-in-law broached the subject first. Is it about George? Yes. What did he do this time? Actually, it's something that has been happening for a while. I explained George's mommy issues. George? A mama's boy? Impossible. If anything, I'm the one who's had enough. I knew it. Then, it felt as if a lump in my heart had been removed. Did you realize it was a lie? I thought it might not be completely impossible, but it was so sudden. Then, the mother-in-law seemed to be deep in thought. That reminds me. I wanted to talk to you about something before. It was about the unfinished story regarding my father-in-law. Is it about your husband? Yes. Your comments reminded me. There was a time when he acted similarly to George now, right before he quit his job. What happened then? Just like you, I went to talk to his mother. I thought the reason my father-in-law left his job was an affair. Deciding to confront the issue head-on, I asked the mother-in-law directly. Do you know why he quit his job? Oh, that? Of course. He had an affair with a young woman from the company, right? You knew? I made quite a sum from the settlement with that woman, though. Oh, and I just remembered, George works at the same company as your father, right? This was completely new to me. You didn't know? No, I didn't. If George was mimicking his father's actions, I couldn't help but suspect he might be having an affair too. Just wondering, but why would your husband say something like that? Probably because he didn't want the affair to get exposed. He'd leave at the slightest inconvenience. He probably used that as an excuse to meet up with his mistress. That's just like George now. I murmured to myself. Don't hold back. What? I didn't want him to turn out like that, but I'm on your side, Hillary. Mother. I fought back tears. Do what you think is right. Yes. 3 nights after talking with the mother-in-law, George began another of his rants. Can't you do it properly for once? What was the point of getting married if it's going to be like this? You don't have to say it like that. I've reached my limit. Despite everything being fine until now. I couldn't help but wonder if this change was hiding something. Even before we got married, it was like this. Limit? Mom used to handle things much better. Why can't you do even this simple thing? Huh? Why don't you do it yourself? You can at least clean, right? In the first place, Before I could finish, my husband started speaking. You are my wife. You should be doing what you're supposed to. Mom never complained about this. I thought, how old are you really? Getting irritated by the constant mentions of mom. What makes me even more irritated is how childlike he becomes when talking about his mother. If he misses his mom that much, he might as well live with her. Yet, his tirades continued unchecked. Hey. How many times do I have to tell you? Are you messing with me with this kind of seasoning? Mom would have known my favorite flavors. I glared at George. What are you glaring at? This is your fault. George said that and flipped the plate in front of him, making a mess on the table as if he had flipped a low dining table. I thought, how much does he really like her? Indeed, my mother-in-law is kind to everyone. And her support for my father-in-law is something I aspire to. But she also had her strictness. That's why I couldn't imagine her spoiling George like this. I thought, I wonder if it's different when I'm not around. I have many questions, but right now, I need to address this situation. I can't eat this, so I'm going to eat out. George said just that and left. Left behind. I cleaned up the mess on the table caused by my husband. Despite doing nothing, his attitude remained superior. If this continues, my mental health will deteriorate. Being pregnant, this could also affect the baby, which I must avoid at all costs. And then, when I was about to give birth, I've found someone better than you, so let's get a divorce. I never thought my husband would say such a thing. However, it was nothing but convenient for me. I'll do as you say. You're surprisingly obedient, huh? Then sign this divorce paper quickly. At that time, I had little interest in the other party. I signed the divorce papers and moved to my parents' house. Furthermore, I received about $50,000 in a lump sum for child support and compensation. George must be satisfied thinking he has cut ties with me. Of course, that was a strategy. After the divorce was finalized, I immediately contacted my father. I have something I want to ask. What is it? George works at your company, right? What? Is that so? I thought you didn't know. I can't know every employee. Then, there's something I'd like you to look into. Thus, I asked my father for a favor. I see. There was talk about a new employee who's been the subject of conversation lately. I believe she works at the reception desk. Hearing that, I had an epiphany. Anyway, could you look into her more closely? Understood. Leave it to me. 2 days after the divorce, my husband came to visit me. Yo. Long time no see. What are you doing here? You have no business with me anymore, right? I thought I'd introduce you out of the goodness of an ex-husband. Look. A cute wife, right? There's a world of difference between her and you, who was nothing but a windowside worker doing menial tasks. I recognized the face of his new wife. I think it was when my mother asked me to deliver something to my father. What? By the way, which company does she work as a receptionist at? Come to think of it, my father mentioned that a new receptionist joined recently. George was unaware. He didn't know that my father was an executive at his company, and that I had already made my moves. At this point, my husband seemed to realize something. Father? Your maiden name was, no, that can't be. And how did you know she's a receptionist? I thought, he wasn't that foolish after all. After that, my husband began to panic and scream as if he had gone mad. Why are you so flustered? Maiden name? You've been deceiving me. You finally realized, huh? Your company's executive.
Yeah.
Well, realizing now is too late. Then, my father appeared. Father. You've done quite a lot, haven't you? But the divorce is already finalized. So what? Huh? The relationship started before the divorce, didn't it? You've made our daughter sad, and that hasn't changed. So, I've already spoken with the HR department. You mean? By now, the president probably knows as well. And it's only a matter of time before you're fired. George's face turned pale. At this point, there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. You see now, right? You better find a new job quickly, along with your lovely wife. Being fired means being unemployed. Well, that suits me just fine. After all, I can show him hell. Guess I'll have to ask Mom for help. That's not going to work, you know. I already talked to your mom about you. And she gave me her blessing to do as I please. What? So, your mother is on my side. All of this is pointless. Got it? Now disappear somewhere, will you? Perhaps realizing it was futile, he reluctantly left. I might never forget the look of a soul leaving his body at that moment. And so, George left, but I still had things to do. I had completely forgotten. But the house George and his new wife were living in was originally leased by me. Which means. Later, I received a call from George. What do you want this time? Why did you do that while we were away? Well, it was my house to begin with. Just rent a new place for yourself. How can I do that? I haven't even found a job yet. Not my problem. Well, you have a brilliant idea, don't you? Ask your mother for help. I tried that. But just like you said, she wouldn't even let me in the house. Oh, what a shame. You're the one to say that. If that's all you wanted to say, I'm hanging up. I'm busy, you know. Hey. The conversation isn't over yet. Ignoring George's protests, I hung up and immediately called the mother-in-law. Hillary, dear, I know what you want to talk about. It's about George, isn't it? You see right through me. Don't worry about that. He hasn't set foot in my house. Thank you. To think he'd leave you for such a young girl and remarry. I'm speechless with dismay. Later, I heard through the grapevine that George and his new wife still hadn't found jobs. Currently, they're staying at her parents' house, where they're treated as nothing but a nuisance. Meanwhile, I recently gave birth to a healthy baby boy. From now on, my life will be all about this child. I'll make sure he doesn't turn out like George.
Divorce me, will you? Huh? Divorce? What's this all of a sudden? Your company is going downhill, isn't it? I married you thinking you'd become rich since you said you were going to be the CEO of an IT company. It started off well, but these past 3 years seem to have been a downfall, which is disappointing. Is that so? You married me for my money? Honestly, I would have divorced you immediately when I found out about the infertility, but at that time, the company seemed to be doing somewhat okay. That's why I put it off until now. I told you the company is fine. Can I really trust just your word? I don't know much, but doesn't a company going bankrupt mean taking on a huge debt? I can't bear the thought of being dragged into trouble because of that. Plus, you're infertile. That's why I'm divorcing you. What do you plan to do after divorcing me? Actually, I've already found someone better. Younger than you, not infertile, so she can have children. And she has a job with a stable income. A total upgrade from you, who might end up in debt if your company fails. There's no hesitation in my husband's words about divorcing me. It seems like he's abandoning me, thinking my company is falling and I can't have children, planning to remarry his lover. Each word he spoke felt like a stab to my heart. Such a husband, I'd rather be the one to ask for a divorce. I divorced him immediately. 5 years later, I encountered an unwanted face while shopping at the mall. Hey, isn't that the infertile ex-CEO? Turning around to a venom-filled greeting, there stood my ex-husband, and beside him was a face I didn't expect to see. I see. That's how it is. I decided to tell him the truth that I couldn't say 5 years ago. Aren't you mistaken about something? The truth will surely surprise my ex-husband. And while I'm at it, I'll throw in a little extra. I am Amy. I'm 32 years old and run an IT company. Though I say I run it, the company was just established. It's an IT company that develops systems and apps using AI, which I started with a man I knew named Mr. White. It's still small since it was just launched, but it's my proud castle. Before building this castle, I thought I wouldn't engage in love or marriage anymore as I was about to start and grow the company. However, just before launching the company, I met my husband, Kevin, and got married. Everyone was surprised since I had declared I wouldn't marry, and I was surprised myself. The marriage happened because a friend introduced me to my husband, but this friend was a bit of a tricky person. Amy, there's a guy I want you to meet instead of me. Instead? I've told you I'm not touching anything related to your love affairs. Well, there was this guy who seemed nice, so I kept him on the back burner. But I've decided to let him go. However, he's the type that doesn't give up easily on me. So I ended up telling him I'd introduce someone better than me. Keep? You have a nice boyfriend, don't you? Plus, better than Mandy? I'm 5 years older than you, not cute at all, and definitely inferior to you. That's not true. You're cool, good at your job, and I think men like that. Besides, the guy I'm introducing you to is the same age as you, so age shouldn't be a concern. But I'm about to launch a company, and I've said I won't be doing anything like romance, remember? Just meet him once, and you can fully ignore him afterward. I think if you meet once, he'll be satisfied. Please, think of it as helping someone out. Fine, but it's just this once. Whatever he says to you later, I don't want to know. With this, I sighed deeply after hanging up the phone, regretting taking on this weird request at such a busy time. Mandy is the sister of my friend. Mandy often contacts me without any particular reason, suddenly invites me out, or makes unreasonable requests like this time. She seems to have many male friends and is quite popular. However, being popular would be fine, but she tends to be careless with men. As a female friend, she's fun and a good person, but because of this, I've kept a reasonable distance and stayed out of love-related discussions to avoid getting involved in unnecessary matters. That's why, even though I'm just acquaintances with her boyfriend, I pretend not to hear anything when she talks about her backup guys. However, since she's my friend's sister and good at pleading with her lively personality, I occasionally end up agreeing to her requests, albeit reluctantly. I decided to meet the man she introduced. I'm actually about to start a company and don't really feel like being in a relationship. I'm sorry, but I'm here today just because Mandy asked me to. You're starting a company? Aren't you the same age as me, Amy? That's amazing. It's so different from me, just being overworked by the company in sales. Can I hear more about your work? Yes. I've been working in IT for a while, and I've decided to start a company with a male acquaintance. My husband was very enthusiastic and engaged in my story. It said that being an entrepreneur is lonely, and it's hard to find someone who has business experience or interests to understand the values. Even my parents were opposed to me quitting my job to start my own business. Because of this, I felt good and ended up talking nonstop. However, my husband didn't show any signs of discomfort and kept nodding, his eyes sparkling more and more. Being already in my late 20s, I thought I might not meet someone who would understand my work values if I let this man go. He liked me for being a hardworking and cool woman, and we started dating. Then, before we became too busy after launching the company, we decided to get married. Of course, I had clearly communicated my work and our future family life before getting married. I think I'm going to focus on work from now on, but are you sure it's okay to get married? Kevin, you want children, don't you? It won't be possible right away. It's a bit disappointing that we can't have children right away, but first, focus on your work. Doing what you want is the most important, right? I'll also work hard on my job. We can both do our best, can't we? Regardless of how we met, I'm really glad I met my husband. I called my friend Mandy to announce our marriage and to thank her. See? I told you he'd be a good match for you, Amy. I don't remember her saying that, but let's go with it. My husband and I got married and successfully launched our company. Now I'm prioritizing work to grow the company. My husband never complains and supports me. I'm glad to have married such a good person. However, as time passed, the situation gradually began to change. 3 years into our marriage, my company was growing smoothly and work had become more manageable. I also turned 35. It's time to address the issue we've been postponing. I know it's a bit weird to say this to a woman, but Amy, you're getting on in years, right? So I was thinking maybe it's time we start trying for a child. I know, we need to think about children too. I'm glad. I was worried you'd say we don't need children because of work. I wouldn't say that. I do want children. It's just that the timing was bad because of the company. But is the company okay? If you get pregnant, you won't be able to work, right? It'll be fine because Mr. White is there. Plus, a lot can be done via telework. I'm not underestimating parenting, okay? I'll work hard at parenting too, so don't worry. My husband, who had been anxious, showed a clear expression of relief. I should have noticed his concerns and reassured him sooner, but I was too focused on work to notice. I'm truly grateful to have been allowed to do as I please by my husband. However, I realized that I had been relying too much on my husband and needed to reflect on that. After that, my husband and I started trying for a baby in earnest. The natural pregnancy rate for women in their late 30s is about 18%. Compared to women in their 20s, this number is low. However, if we continue trying for a year, the chances of getting pregnant are over 60%. This number isn't too low at all. That's what I thought. But sorry, it's because I'm old. I'm the same age, aren't I? Stop saying things like that, even as a joke. It's been a year since we started trying for a baby, and we still haven't succeeded. I tried to lighten the mood at home with a joke, but it only made us feel emptier together. We might have gotten pregnant if it was right after we got married. I started to feel guilty towards my husband. So, with a desire to increase our chances of pregnancy, I decided to visit the gynecologist for fertility advice. But this decision only made my guilt worse. I need fertility treatments. I was told that today after getting tested at the gynecologist. So, does that mean we can't have kids? Hearing the word treatment made Kevin's shoulders slump. I felt guilty seeing him like that, but it wasn't as hopeless as he seemed to think. I told my husband there was still hope for pregnancy. We can still have children. The success rate for fertility treatments in women in their late 30s is 30%. That's not too low, is it? If we undergo treatment, we can have children. When I heard this from the doctor, I felt as though a ray of hope had shone through. However, Kevin didn't seem to think so. So you're saying, after taking the 30% chance with fertility treatments, we still had to consider the natural pregnancy rate of 18%, and that rate will decrease as we get older. Isn't this a tougher chance than we thought? Even after hearing my words, Kevin remained downcast. The infertility is due to my body, so I do feel guilty towards him. However, it's not like we can't get pregnant at all, so I wished he would say we should try together. At that moment, I felt a great chasm had formed between us. After discovering my infertility, Kevin and I decided to continue trying for a baby, including fertility treatments. However, the gap that formed between us seemed deeper than I thought, and Kevin was uncooperative with the fertility efforts. I'll be home late today, so go ahead and sleep without me. You don't have to wait like before. Again? You've been coming home late a lot recently. Just like you were busy with work, I'm trying my best too. A year after the infertility discovery, our attempt at having a baby quietly ended. Kevin seemed to be working hard, so I decided to put my energy back into work. However, it seems when one bad thing happens, more follow, and I found myself stressed with work too. You've been really frantic since last year, haven't you? Are you busy? But even when you were busy and looked tired, you seemed happy. Did something happen? It's been 5 years since I started the company. It was going well until recently, but the momentum has stalled. Is the business in trouble? It's not like that. It's just that growth has plateaued recently. If it's just a plateau after doing well, isn't that fine? Other companies are growing rapidly, so staying the same is essentially the same as declining. If we don't take action now, things will only get worse. I might not understand fully, but is the company really okay? Yes, it's fine. I'm sure we'll manage somehow. Managing somehow? Are you sure that's okay to say without any basis? Since discovering my infertility, I felt Kevin had become somewhat distant. However, that wasn't the case. He seemed to be worried about me. Is the company okay? Has the situation improved a bit since then? Kevin continued to express concern for me over time. While I appreciated his worry, even after 1 year, then 2, the situation remained unchanged and I kept scrambling. You keep saying it's fine, but it's been 3 years now. A lot of time has passed, and isn't your company reaching its limit? I told you it's fine. We have just a bit more to go. That sounds like something someone in a desperate situation would say. It seems like your company isn't doing well after all. Well, running a company isn't something that just goes smoothly. It's better to work a regular job and try hard than to chase strange dreams. Can you stop talking like that? It's the truth, isn't it? I've been working steadily and got promoted over these 5 years. In contrast, your company is in a precarious situation. Who can say you've been working properly? That's why I'm saying it's going to be okay soon. Alright, I got it. My husband scoffed at me and then left the living room. Unable to retort, I remained in the living room, holding back my frustration. My husband has indeed been working hard. There are days he comes home later than me, and he sometimes works on weekends or goes on business trips. Just like I've been working hard at my job, he has been diligent in his own right. But just because he's achieved good results, it doesn't mean he should look down on my work. Since that day, my husband clearly started looking down on me. Your company is about to go under, isn't it? Every time he sees my face at home, he throws hurtful words at me. But I thought it was just a little more patience I needed. Just when I thought we were close to overcoming this, my husband dropped a bomb I couldn't endure. Divorce me, will you? Huh? Divorce? What's this all of a sudden? When my husband came home from work, he confronted me, who was preparing dinner, and suddenly demanded a divorce. I never thought he would go as far as asking for a divorce, and my hands trembled as I turned off the stove. Your company is going downhill, isn't it? I married you thinking you'd become rich since you said you were going to be the CEO of an IT company. It started off well, but these past 3 years seem to have been a downfall, which is disappointing. Is that so? You married me for my money. Would I seriously listen to your complicated job talk if it wasn't for that? I would have divorced you immediately when I found out about the infertility, but the company seemed okay back then. But now, there's no point in staying together if the company's doing poorly, right? I told you, the company is fine. Can I really trust just your word? I don't know much, but doesn't a company going bankrupt mean taking on a huge debt? I can't bear the thought of being dragged into trouble because of that. Plus, you're infertile. That's why I'm divorcing you. Being infertile doesn't mean it's absolutely impossible, does it? You just stopped cooperating. What do you plan to do after divorcing me? Actually, I've already found someone better. Younger than you, not infertile, so she can have children. And she has a job with a stable income. A total upgrade from you, who might end up in debt if your company fails. There is no hesitation in my husband's words about divorcing me. Every word he speaks feels like it's tearing at my heart. Initially, I thought about avoiding divorce, but now I'd rather be the one to ask for it. If you already have someone else, doesn't that mean you're committing adultery? Guess that's what it would be. Adultery and compensation for it. I prepared for that. He casually tossed a large envelope onto the kitchen table. It looked unnaturally bulged, suggesting something thick was inside. Dealing with claims and all that is a hassle, right? There is $20,000 in there. So can we just settle this divorce smoothly with that as a settlement fee or severance payment? What are you talking about? How could I possibly accept that money? Don't act tough. Don't you need every bit of money you can get right now? Or are you planning to throw a tantrum saying you don't want to divorce me? I'll divorce you, but I don't want your money. Reaching my limit with my husband's actions, I left the still cool pot of soup on the stove and started preparing to leave the house. We divorced soon after. Of course, I didn't claim the adultery compensation to avoid further upset. Right now, I can't afford to spend my nerves and energy on divorce or adultery. However, when the divorce was decided, I did contact Mandy, who introduced me to my former husband to report, and it was a moment of emotional strain. I'm sorry, despite your introduction, we ended up getting a divorce. It's fine, isn't it? Whether to divorce or not is up to the two of you. Mandy, you broke up with your boyfriend about half a year ago, right? Now we're both single. Yeah, but don't lump me in with you. I got someone on the back burner. It seems Mandy still has a careless way with men. However, her attitude towards me has changed. She used to be friendly, bright, and aggressive, but now her responses to my words are cold. She must be upset because I divorced the ex-husband she introduced me to. After the divorce, our communication abruptly stopped. Losing any friend is a lonely thing, but I can't dwell on it. I braced myself, taking a sharp breath through my nose, ready to face what's next. 5 years after the divorce, I was off work and went shopping at the mall. That's when I ran into a face I did not want to see. Hey, isn't that the infertile ex-CEO? Turning around to a venom-filled greeting, there stood my ex-husband, and beside him was a face I didn't expect to see. Long time no see. You still live around here? What? Mandy? It's not unusual for my ex-husband and Mandy to know each other and be together. However, seeing a big child standing right behind them is surprising. Yet, I somehow had an idea. I married Kevin. This kid is ours, Kevin and mine. Jealous of our child? Mandy got pregnant right away, unlike you. My ex-husband and Mandy seemed proud to bring the child to the front, showing him off to me. The child, looking about elementary school age, stood there, embarrassed by the sudden attention. Clearly, the someone better my ex-husband mentioned was indeed Mandy. Judging by the child's age, he must have been conceived right after our divorce. Perhaps Mandy was already pregnant before we divorced. A relationship deep enough to have a child suggests it wasn't just a recent affair. My ex-husband, who often came home late, worked on weekends, or went on business trips, must have been pretending to work while actually engaging in an affair. Mandy, while introducing my ex-husband to me, probably kept him as one of many backups, eventually promoting him to her main interest as he became more successful. Cutting off contact with me might have been her way to avoid getting tangled in the divorce mess. Standing there, seeing my ex-husband and Mandy with their child, my mind raced with these thoughts. Sorry for taking Kevin. You're over 40 now, so you're still single, right? Since she's infertile, she's obviously alone. Don't say such pitiful things. How's work? Has your company gone under and left you drowning in debt? Kevin's the one saying pitiful things. My ex-husband and Mandy looked down on me together. However, they were unaware of the truth about me. Aren't you misunderstanding something? I decided it was time to reveal the truth I hadn't shared 5 years ago. While talking with the two of them, a man approached us. Sorry, the restroom was crowded. Who are these people? My ex-husband and Mandy, who introduced him to me. You heard about them, right? These are the people. Nice to meet you. I'm Amy's husband, George. What? Husband? That's right. Remember White? The guy I started a business with. George is White. So you remarried a work colleague. We were business partners, so there were no romantic feelings at first, but after the divorce, I realized how much he supported me. Both seemed surprised to learn I had remarried, likely more shocked by George bringing a child along than the fact of my remarriage. I get the marriage part, but that child? I've been wondering since earlier. Is he your husband's child from a previous marriage or something? Don't be rude. He is my and George's child. What? You had a child? I thought you were infertile. How did this happen? That's a rude thing to say. Didn't I tell you I wasn't completely unable to get pregnant? Unlike you, George was supportive of infertility treatment from the start of our relationship, and he actively participated in fertility efforts. Then, just before I turned 40, we had this child. But at 40, wouldn't the chances of pregnancy be even lower than when we were together? Just because the odds decrease doesn't mean they drop to zero. Indeed, the natural pregnancy rate at 40 is around 5%, and the success rate for fertility treatments was about 15%. But with George's support, it doesn't matter how low the odds are. When a couple truly cooperates, storks can bring babies, you know? My ex-husband began to show a frustrated expression. He tried to lord over me with being single and infertile, but it was all in vain. Mandy, too, seemed displeased, likely thinking she had been leading a happier life than me, only to find out I was remarried with a child, placing us on even ground. Mandy's face seemed a bit irked as well. Desperate to assert dominance, they started poking at work-related topics. George, it must have been tough with the company. What do you do now? That's right, Amy. What kind of work are you doing now? You two are misunderstanding something again. We're still working at our company, you know. What? I thought your company went under. How much more rude can you be? Our company didn't go under. In fact, right after we divorced, the company went public, making it easier to raise funds and gain credit. Over the past 5 years, it has grown significantly. No way. That's totally different from what Kevin told me. My ex-husband and Mandy showed their most surprised faces of the day. The company was a critical factor that influenced my ex-husband's decision-making regarding our marriage and divorce. Discovering that the reality was nearly the opposite of what they imagined was understandably shocking. Now, I could finally share with my husband the news I hadn't been able to tell 5 years ago. You were busy for 3 years before our divorce, and all you ever said was everything's fine. How could such a company go public? That busyness was because we were preparing for the IPO. Going public takes time for audits and applications. It took us 3 years, that's why. What? So you were already planning to go public back then? Why didn't you tell me? Talking about preparing for an IPO could violate insider trading regulations. In other words, it would be a crime. I couldn't just say it. I wanted you to trust me when I said it was going to be okay. So, your company was that big to go public? Do you think only big-name corporations can go public? The requirements for an IPO vary by market, and even our company size 5 years ago was sufficient. So, to grow our already stalling company even bigger, we went public. Have you been promoted since then? Well, a little promotion wouldn't compare to the scale of our company's growth. So I guess asking might not mean much. My ex-husband failed to dominate in the work department as well. Plus, my slightly prickly comments seemed to have left him feeling bitter. Having counteracted all their remarks, I felt satisfied. Ignoring my sulking ex-husband and Mandy, I turned to their child. How old are you? I'm 6 years old. For Kevin's child, you're quite mature. Wait, 6 years old? Recalling the child's age, I suddenly remembered something. Mandy, you broke up with your previous boyfriend about half a year before Kevin and I divorced, right? Your ex contacted me to say he was suddenly dumped by you. Was that because you were pretending to be happy with him until just before the breakup? And since Kevin was involved, considering it was a year before our divorce, that means you were seeing both at the same time? Choosing my words carefully in front of the child. Are you suggesting this child is my ex's? That's ridiculous. This child is mine and Kevin's. Look at this kid. Doesn't he look like me? The meaning behind my vague words vanished. I wasn't seriously thinking they weren't the parents of the child. I just hoped that knowing my ex-husband and Mandy's relationship overlapped might cause them a little trouble. However, from my ex-husband's reaction, it seemed he knew Mandy had a boyfriend during their affair. George, shall we go? Yes. Let's. Disgusted by these two hopeless individuals, we decided to leave the scene. At that moment, I hadn't imagined my casual words would lead to the collapse of my ex-husband and Mandy's relationship. Months after encountering my ex-husband and Mandy, I unexpectedly received a call from my ex-husband. Did you know? Why didn't you tell me? What are you talking about? I have no idea what you mean. It's about our child. Just like you said, the child was from her ex. What? Really? I couldn't help but laugh inappropriately at the unexpected turn of events. It seems there was a chaos around my ex-husband because the child he thought was his turned out not to be. After what you said at the mall, to be sure, we decided to do a DNA test for peace of mind. It showed the child wasn't mine, and further investigation revealed it was her ex's child. So, Mandy cuckooed you? No, it's more complicated than that, because I've been raising someone else's child for 6 years. I don't want to take care of someone else's child anymore, so I asked Mandy for a divorce. But Mandy thought it was my child too, not a deliberate deception, so she won't divorce me. Both of us thought it was our child, so legally, it's listed as mine, making it incredibly difficult to undo that parental relationship. Now I'm stuck raising someone else's child. As my ex-husband rambled on, I became increasingly annoyed. And now her ex knows it's his child and wants to take custody, but he has no intention of remarrying Mandy. Mandy doesn't want to give up the child without being together. If only she would hand over the child, it would all be resolved neatly. A quagmire among my ex-husband who wants a divorce, the ex-boyfriend who wants the child, and Mandy who wants to keep the child but not be a single mother. I haven't heard from the ex-boyfriend, so I can't comment on that. But I had some words for my ex-husband. You're a big company CEO, right? Can't you help me out with some top-notch lawyer or money? We were married once, weren't we? Furious at my ex-husband's selfishness, I unleashed a tirade. Why should I help someone as irresponsible as you? If you've been a parent for 6 years, that child is your beloved child, isn't it? Who cares who the real father is? Take responsibility and raise him. I hung up in a huff. Later, I heard the child was taken in by the ex-boyfriend. I know the ex-boyfriend to be far more decent than my ex-husband and Mandy, so I was relieved the child wasn't left with them. However, I regret that my offhand remark led to turmoil for a 6-year-old child. But if the ex-boyfriend is caring for the child, I trust he'll support his mental well-being. Mandy, now childless, was mentally distressed. My ex-husband, not supporting Mandy, pushed for divorce. Losing the child, Mandy agreed to the divorce. Terrible tales spread, making my ex-husband a target of condemnation, abandoned even by his family and now completely isolated. My ex-husband, under constant criticism, is mentally suffering. While my ex-husband and Mandy might be in pain, I believe the child, dragged through their mess, suffered the most. They deserve to face their hardships. Life and work are thriving for us. Our company continues to grow and our child is happily growing up. George, already fussing over school desks for our kindergartner, brings me joy in our ordinary discussions about our child.
Sign this, please. Wait, what's going on? What my husband casually handed me was a divorce form. What do you mean, what's going on? Just look at this paper. I want a divorce from you. Why all of a sudden? It's not sudden. I've been thinking about this for a long time. Actually, I have a child with the woman I love. What? It was a complete shock. I was so surprised that I couldn't find the words and just stood there. Well, our marriage has been over for a long time, hasn't it? Indeed, our relationship had been strained for some time, but I never imagined he was cheating and had even fathered a child. Wait a minute. I just gave birth to our daughter and got discharged from the hospital. That day, I had just been discharged from the hospital after giving birth. I thought we would live happily ever after with our newborn baby. Why? You've just been discharged from the hospital, so I was hesitant about bringing this up today, but things like this are better done sooner, right? Besides, my girlfriend has been nagging me to hurry up and divorce, he said with a grin. I could deeply feel that in the future he envisioned, there was no place for me and our child. Tears welled up in my eyes due to his utmost betrayal. What about? What am I supposed to do now? Thus, I was unilaterally presented with divorce, and we ended up divorcing. 7 years had passed since then. One day, while I was visiting a large shopping mall, I unexpectedly ran into the worst person imaginable. Hey, isn't that Nicole? Long time no see. He was the last person on earth I wanted to encounter. Wow, you've aged. It must have been tough after our divorce, right? Being a single mother is hard, he said, unbelievably, considering he was the one who left me and our child. Suppressing the anger welling up inside, I replied with heavy sarcasm. Thanks to my parents' help, I didn't have any problems without you. Why are you acting tough? Your dad's just a small-town doctor, right? Such parents couldn't have been of any help. Honestly, they must have been totally unreliable. He laughed mockingly. Taking my silence for acquiescence, he began to boast about his own life without waiting for my response. After that, I married a female doctor. You, just a part-timer, and I are worlds apart. My wife is competent, 10 years younger than me, wealthy, and ensures a worry-free life for me. Isn't it great? Sorry for being the only happy one here. He laughed in a very vulgar manner, looking down on me. Oh. Which hospital does your wife work at? Why? Interested? Thompson Hospital. It's a famous general hospital that just opened in this area. Even you, working as a part-time nurse, should have heard of it, right? Thompson Hospital. Huh. I couldn't help but smile as he talked proudly. I knew that hospital very well. I deeply felt the irony of fate. That hospital. Of course, I know it. Because, as the truth dawned on him, my ex-husband's face turned pale rapidly. My name is Nicole. My father runs a small clinic in town, and my mother works as the office manager there. My father, being a doctor, always seemed busy, sparing no time for sleep as he worked every day. As a child, I sometimes felt lonely due to the environment I was in, but my admiration and respect for my father were stronger than the loneliness. Someday, I want to become someone who can save many people, just like Dad. That was my catchphrase when I was little. As I grew up, I didn't become a doctor like my father, but I started working as a nurse. However, the job was more physically demanding than I had imagined, and I was exhausted every day. Can I keep up the good work as a nurse? Can I become a cool adult like my father? I was filled with anxiety and impatience every day. It was during such times that I met Ryan, who would later become my husband. Ryan was 5 years older than me and owned the cafe closest to the hospital where I worked. The beginning was when Ryan talked to me as I sat with a gloomy face during my lunch break, sighing with the same coffee in my hand every day. "Hey, miss. I don't know what's going on, but drink this and cheer up a bit." What he offered me was a coffee with cute rabbit art. This. It's on the house. Come on, smile. Ryan smiled so brightly. Seeing him like that, I naturally smiled back. After that, I became very curious about Ryan, and I found myself watching him every time I went to the cafe. About 3 months after meeting Ryan, I took the initiative to ask for his contact information, and our relationship developed into dating. Then, 2 years later, he proposed. On the day Ryan came to ask for my hand in marriage, he said to my parents, "I will definitely make Nicole happy. So, please be at ease." He looked so reliable, and I fell for him all over again. My parents, seeing Ryan, said, "Thank you. Please take good care of Nicole. Both of you be happy. We're supporting you." With tears in their eyes, genuinely happy about our marriage. Then, on another day, we went to greet Ryan's parents. Ryan may seem unreliable at times, but please take care of him. If Ryan ever does anything wrong, come tell me right away. I'll scold him on your behalf. My in-laws were very easy to talk to and seemed kind, which was my first impression of them. After greetings with both families, we got married without a hitch. We lived happily as a couple, enjoying our days together. Of course, there were times of dissatisfaction or unpleasantness, but the parts that made me glad we were married and the happiness far outweighed those, so I felt our marriage was going well. Then, one day, a couple of years later, my husband made a suggestion. "Isn't it about time we make Nicole's dream come true?" My dream? Yeah, building our dream home, remember? What? I was surprised by my husband's sudden suggestion. You remembered. Of course. How could I forget? My dream of wanting to build a dream home was something I had only mentioned in passing while we were dating. So, I was surprised that he remembered, and above all, I was delighted that he hadn't forgotten such a trivial thing. Thank you, Ryan. After that, we went to real estate agencies and looked at various properties. Just looking at model homes made us feel excited. Wow, look. This kitchen is so cool. I pointed at a flat kitchen. I had always wanted to cook in such a spacious kitchen someday. Really, it is cool. It'd be fun to cook in a kitchen like this. Nicole, look at this bath. Isn't it amazing? It's so cool, and it's spacious enough to soak in every day. We were getting excited like kids. We continued to visit properties on our days off, talking about what kind of house we would like. It was a lot of fun. However, the discussion about building our dream home took an unexpected turn. One day, on our day off, my husband and I, having narrowed down our options, went to a housing exhibition. Surprisingly, my mother-in-law was there. Huh? Why is my mother-in-law here? I was puzzled by her presence and couldn't help but ask. My mother-in-law then made a surprising statement. Well, because I'll be living with you. If we're building a house, it's better to hear my opinion too, right? What? I couldn't believe my ears. When had this been decided? I hadn't heard a word about living together from my husband. I quietly confronted him so my mother-in-law wouldn't hear. Hey, what's going on, Ryan? Your mom said she's going to live with us, but I haven't heard anything about that. Oh. Didn't I mention it? What? You know, after my dad passed away last year? Mom looked so lonely, and I couldn't leave her by herself. Indeed, my father-in-law had passed away from a heart attack last year. It was very sudden. My in-laws were very close, and I always found it sweet how they went out holding hands every weekend. After my father-in-law's sudden death, my mother-in-law was deeply saddened, and both my husband and I were worried about her, but I had no idea they were considering living together. I understand not wanting to leave her alone, but still. I had reservations about living together and was anxious about whether we could get along well. Yet, I couldn't just ignore my mother-in-law. What to do? After a moment of silence, my husband, perhaps regretting not discussing it with me, murmured, "I'm sorry. But, as you can see, Mom's happy about living together, so please forgive her." He looked towards my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law was gleefully touring the housing exhibition, admiring the stylish kitchens and baths, saying, "Lovely." It had been a long time since I'd seen her so happy, and I couldn't help but smile too. Our relationship with my mother-in-law was good, and I began to think, well, if it makes her a bit happier, maybe it's okay. So, the house planning progressed, and after some time, our dream house was completed. At first, my mother-in-law would often stay in her room or tear up looking at photos of my father-in-law, but she seemed to enjoy the new house and gradually started spending more time in the living room. Initially, I was too cautious around my mother-in-law and felt exhausted, but over time, we found a comfortable distance, and I think both of us were able to enjoy our time together. However, my husband's careless comment would soon make the atmosphere a bit strange. "I think it's about time we had a kid." He suddenly said this during a meal with me and my mother-in-law. Both of us were surprised by his abrupt statement. I lightly kicked him under the table, signaling him to stop. "You don't have to say that now, do you?" But my insensitive husband didn't seem to catch my displeasure. "Well, it's true, right? We've been married for 2 years now. Right, Mom? You want to see your grandchild, don't you?" he said, turning to my mother-in-law with a foolish grin. "Oh, well. Of course." She glanced at me, answering hesitantly. I wanted children too, but there was no need to discuss it in front of my mother-in-law. Moreover, children are a blessing. It's not as if they come just because you want them. Well, I want them too, but they're a blessing, you know? We can't just expect things to work out. I calmly explained, but my husband, lacking any delicacy, said, It'll be fine. Let's start trying for a baby tomorrow." I sighed deeply in my heart. A few days after my husband's insensitive remark, my mother-in-law went into full-on grandchild-wanting mode, constantly asking about children. "How have you been feeling? Any nausea? Today's dinner is steak. It's supposed to be good for your energy. We splurged, so eat up and give it your all tonight." And so on. It turned out that lack of delicacy wasn't exclusive to my husband but my mother-in-law as well. Thus, my mother-in-law's pressuring for us to have a baby increased. However, getting pregnant can be difficult, and it's common not to conceive right away when you want to. Months passed without any signs of pregnancy for me. A year later, our relationship began to strain. "Why aren't you getting pregnant? Is there something wrong with you? Don't just blame me. It could be your fault too." Arguments became more frequent, fueled by such exchanges. My mother-in-law even joined in. "Nicole, maybe it's because you're always cold? Warm up more." It was too much to bear. Realizing this couldn't continue, I thought hard and then seriously suggested to my husband, "Hey, we've been stressing each other out about trying to conceive lately, right? So, how about we get some fertility treatments? Let's get tested." I was worried he might react poorly, but it seemed he had been thinking about it too. After some thought, he agreed. "Yeah, let's do that." The following week, we went to a fertility clinic for tests. A few days later, the test results showed that both of us were Normal. The doctor advised us to check the ovulation days and try to time things accordingly. Having received the results, it was clear that I wasn't the cause, which was a relief. My mother-in-law and husband stopped blaming me persistently, and I was glad we went through with the testing. Additionally, the reduction in stress after receiving the results might have helped because, despite previously struggling to conceive, I found out I was pregnant 2 months later when my period was late. My mother-in-law was truly happy about my pregnancy, saying, "Leave the housework to me. Nicole, just relax and focus on giving birth to a healthy baby." She started helping around the house more than ever, returning to her kind self. But the change wasn't just with my mother-in-law. My husband's attitude changed too, but for the worse. At first, he was happy about the pregnancy, but gradually, he began to treat me coldly. "Damn, we have the mortgage, and without your salary, we're strapped for cash." He complained more about money. As a nurse, I had a decent salary, but going on maternity leave reduced our income. I considered delaying maternity leave, but my mother-in-law advised, "You're doing physical work, so it's better to take maternity leave early to avoid any risks." I took her advice early, but my husband didn't seem to like it. "You could have worked longer. You took maternity leave too early. It couldn't be helped. Your mother was worried, and we can manage on your salary alone if we don't splurge. We shouldn't be struggling that much, right? Ah, women have it so good. Get pregnant and dump all the work on the man." He grumbled, irritable, and retreated to his room. When my morning sickness started, "Ugh, I feel sick." As I rushed to the bathroom, he even said, "Ah, not again, such a hassle. It makes me feel sick too." It seemed like getting pregnant was the only goal for my husband, and he had no interest in anything beyond that. Feeling immense stress from my husband's attitude, I often found myself crying when he was at work. Seeing me like this, my mother-in-law suggested, "Why don't you go back to your parents' house until you reach a stable period? Sometimes a little distance can make things better." My mother-in-law mentioned that during her pregnancy with Ryan, hormonal changes led to frequent arguments with my father-in-law. Returning to her parents' home to put some distance between them helped her find peace and approach childbirth with ease. Hearing such stories from my in-laws, who were usually so close, made me think that maybe a little distance was necessary right now. It was around the 4th month of my pregnancy when, encouraged by my mother-in-law, I decided to return to my parents' home. The distance created between my husband and me, along with the active support from my parents, finally allowed me to settle down and enjoy a peaceful maternity life. Being at home, just knowing my father, a doctor, was there made me feel secure. Meanwhile, taking advantage of my absence, my husband began to live more freely, coming home late from work or not coming home at all, as I was informed by my mother-in-law over the phone. I thought, how can he not even show his face once, knowing he has a child on the way? Since returning to my parents' house, my husband hadn't visited once. Apart from administrative matters, he didn't contact me at all. It was natural to feel angry at him. The small cracks in our relationship that had started before I returned home gradually widened. As I entered my final month of pregnancy, I asked my husband if he would be present at the birth. He quickly refused. "What? No way. I can't deal with blood." I was more astonished than angry at his response. When labor started, my parents took me to the hospital and I gave birth to a beautiful girl without him. A week later, upon our safe discharge, it was time to return to the house I shared with my husband and mother-in-law. The atmosphere at home felt slightly different. "Thank you so much for everything, Mother. Welcome back. Congratulations on your childbirth. I'll take care of the house, so you just relax," she said, seemingly sad. Wondering, I thanked her and sat on the sofa, holding my daughter. That night, past 10 p.m., my husband hadn't returned home. I had hoped to mend our relationship for our child's sake, but it seemed he had no such intentions. "I'll be heading to bed now. Ryan's been busy with work, so it looks like he'll be late again tonight. You must be tired from the discharge, so go ahead and sleep first. My mother-in-law said, looking sadly resigned as she returned to her room. After midnight, I heard the front door open. I'm home. He immediately went upstairs to the bedroom. Welcome back. It's late. Our daughter is sleeping, so please be quiet. He glared at me. As noisy as ever, even after I've been away for so long. Can't help it. She just fell asleep. Humph. Well, I have something to tell you. He rummaged through his bag and handed me a piece of paper. Sign this, please. Shocked, I looked at the paper. Wait a minute. What's going on? It was a divorce form. What do you mean, what's going on? Just look at this paper. I want a divorce from you. Why all of a sudden? It's not sudden. I've been thinking about this for a long time. Actually, I have a child with the woman I love. What? It was a complete shock. I was so surprised that I couldn't find the words and just stood there. Well, our marriage has been over for a long time, hasn't it? Indeed, our relationship had been strained for some time, but I never imagined he was cheating and had fathered a child. Wait a minute. I just gave birth to our daughter and got discharged from the hospital. I thought we would all be happy together. You've just been discharged from the hospital, so I was hesitant about bringing this up today, but things like this are better done sooner, right? Besides, my girlfriend has been nagging me to hurry up and divorce, he said with a grin. I could deeply feel that in the future he envisioned, there was no place for me and our child. Tears welled up in my eyes due to his utmost betrayal. What about your mother? How are you going to explain this to her? Oh, my mom? She agrees with the divorce. When I talked to her about my girlfriend, she said she's better than you. What? I swallowed hard. So, that's what it was. That explains the awkward reaction from my mother-in-law. That's the situation. So, please leave this house. It's under my name, after all. You should go back to your parents' house by tomorrow. I've already told my mom you'll be leaving tomorrow. What are you planning to do with this child? It's your child, you know. Ah, right. The child. But I already have another child now, so you raise this one. I'll get in touch about child support and compensation later. Can we end this talk now? I'm busy. Saying this, he began to hastily pack my belongings into trash bags and placed them by the entrance, indicating that I should leave. Thus, I was unilaterally presented with divorce, and we ended up divorcing. Later, through a lawyer, we discussed compensation with my husband. The total amount including child support and compensation came to about $80,000, but oddly, my husband wasn't fazed. It's fine with that amount. I'll pay in full, so just don't do anything to harm me and my affair partner, he said, laughing as if it was a joke. The fact that he could pay in full was astonishing. Where did he get such a large sum of money? But if it meant I no longer had to deal with this terrible man, it was for the best for me. Yes, I have no interest in you or your affair partner anymore. Also, I have one request. Never interfere with me and the child again. If you can't keep that, then I have my own plans. He frowned for a moment but then nodded. All right, it's settled. The following week, as promised, the money was transferred to my account. Thus, our marriage ended quite abruptly. 5 years have passed since then, and I turned 35. The daughter born at that time is now 5 years old and will be entering elementary school next year. After the divorce, I returned to live with my parents, and I'm still living with them. With the support of my family, I returned to work as a nurse after giving birth. Despite being busy every day, life is fulfilling thanks to my adorable daughter. One day, while I was at a large shopping mall, I unexpectedly ran into a certain person. Hey, isn't that Nicole? Long time no see. It was my ex-husband, the last person I wanted to see. I inadvertently let out. What's with that ugh? Man, you've aged. Anyway, what have you been up to since our divorce? Must have been tough. Being a single mother is hard, he said, as if it was someone else's problem. I thought. You're the one who abandoned me and our child. I desperately suppressed the rising anger and sarcastically replied. Thanks to my parents' help, I didn't have any problems without you. Why are you pretending to be strong? Your dad's just a small-town doctor, right? And your mom's the office manager? Such parents couldn't have been of any help. Honestly, they must have been totally unreliable. He laughed mockingly. I felt my fists trembling with rage, wanting to punch this awful man, but I knew that wouldn't change the past. As I remained silent, flooded with unpleasant memories, he took advantage of my silence to start bragging about himself. After that, I married a female doctor. Pretty great, right? A doctor. Her dad's a real estate tycoon, and they're wealthy. So, her background. I finally understood why he could pay a substantial amount for compensation and child support during our divorce. Perhaps the father of his affair partner had covered the costs after finding out about their affair. I see. That must be nice for you. That's why I could pay off the money quickly. My affair partner being wealthy made my mom agree to the remarriage right away. So, that was it. Not only was I puzzled why my mother-in-law forgave his affair, but it seemed she was dazzled by the money as well. Anyway, you're just a part-timer now, right? My wife, a doctor, and you're worlds apart. She's skilled, 10 years younger than me, wealthy, and ensures a worry-free life. Isn't it great? Sorry for being the only happy one here. He laughed obnoxiously from a position of superiority. Oh. Which hospital does your wife work at? Why? Interested? Thompson Hospital. It's a famous general hospital that recently opened in this area. Even you, working as a part-time nurse, should have heard of it, right? Thompson Hospital. Huh. I couldn't help but smile as he bragged. I knew that hospital very well. Oh, Thompson Hospital. Your wife works at my father's hospital. Huh? But I thought your dad was just a small-town doctor. A few years ago, with some encouragement from acquaintances, he opened it. Remember my maiden name? Thompson. You mean your dad is the director? Yes, that's right. I had no idea. My wife transferred there recently, but I never thought such a big hospital's director would be your dad. But one thing puzzled me. You said your wife recently transferred to Thompson Hospital? Yeah. I wonder. Is your wife's name by any chance Amy Smith? How do you know my wife's name? Indeed. I had suspected it, but to think that my ex-husband's affair partner was Amy Smith. With Smith being a common surname in the US, I hadn't realized until now. Fate is indeed ironic. I had no lingering feelings or hatred towards my ex-husband anymore, but I thought it was time for some payback for the betrayal I experienced back then. I decided to reveal the truth about my ex-husband's wife, Amy Smith. I'm working at Thompson Hospital now, so I know about Mrs. Smith. She transferred here a year ago after causing a scandal with a married patient at another hospital. Scandal? With a married man. Oh, you didn't know? Sorry. It was quite a famous story at our hospital. Before transferring, she was caught having an affair with a patient in his early 20s, and the patient's wife stormed into the hospital yelling. They settled it with a settlement, so I guess you hadn't heard. No way. Amy had an affair? That can't be. My ex-husband's face turned pale rapidly, going completely white. Perhaps recalling certain incidents, he started mumbling to himself. But indeed, that time too. Now that I think about it, that time as well. Oh, and right after she transferred to us, I think. A high school student's girlfriend was causing a scene in the hospital room, claiming that Dr. Smith harassed my boyfriend during her shift. Hitting on a high school student is a bit problematic, don't you think? There are rumors she has a thing for young guys. What? Hold on. Affairs with married men? Harassing high school students? Preferences? Amy doesn't even. Well, it's not like her not doing anything with me matters anymore. I can't make sense of any of this. He seemed to be panicking. It was almost comical. Huh, you didn't know that? Maybe she doesn't bother with you because you're an old man. Or maybe because there are rumors she has plenty of boyfriends on the side, so she doesn't need you? It's exactly like someone I used to know. Both of you like younger partners. You're a perfect match. I laughed heartily. He was too shocked to speak, standing frozen in place. I decided to let him know about my current situation. I'm seeing someone now. He's a surgeon at Thompson Hospital, a doctor. My father approves of him. My daughter is about to start elementary school, she's such a sweet girl. He really cares for her, and I'm genuinely happy every day. It seems I'm the only one happy here, sorry about that. Biting his lip in frustration, he yelled. There's no way my wife is like that, but I ignored him and walked away. What goes around comes around. My ex-husband left me postpartum for a younger, beautiful doctor, but his wife turned out to be someone who only had affairs with younger men. If my ex-husband hadn't encountered me at the shopping center or spoken to me, he might have remained ignorant of his wife's secrets. Serves him right. 2 months later, although Amy didn't lose her medical license, she was transferred again due to multiple harassment allegations involving young patients. Upon investigation by the hospital, several testimonies emerged, such as, Dr. Smith touched my lower body. And she asked me to touch her chest. My father, the director, decided her transfer was necessary to prevent further harm to the hospital's reputation. After learning of Amy's transfer, which confirmed what I had said was true, my ex-husband confronted her. Acknowledging the affairs and harassment led to a massive argument between them, ultimately resulting in their divorce. Amy ended up raising the child born from their marriage, and my ex-husband moved back in with his mother. As for me, I continue to live happily surrounded by a caring partner, a lovely child, and supportive parents. What you do comes back to you. I plan to live honestly and uprightly from now on.